Of the power of the imagination. A strong imagination creates the event, say the scholars. I am one of those who are very much influenced by the imagination. Everyone feels its impact, but some are overthrown by it. Its impression on me is piercing, and my art is to escape it, not to resist it. I would live solely in the presence of gay, healthy people. The sight of other people's anguish causes very real anguish to me, and my feelings have often usurped the feelings of others. A continual cough irritates my lungs and throat. I visit less willingly the sick, toward whom duty directs me, than those toward whom I am less attentive and concerned. I catch the disease that I study and lodge it in me. I do not find it strange that imagination brings fevers and death to those who give it a free hand and encourage it. Simon Thomas was a great doctor in his time. I remember that one day, when he met me at the house of a rich old consumptive, with whom he was discussing ways to cure his illness, he told him that one of these would be to give me occasion to enjoy his company, and that by fixing his eyes on the freshness of my face, and his thoughts on the blitheness and overflowing vigor of my youth, and filling all his senses with my flourishing condition, he might improve his constitution. But he forgot to say that mine might get worse at the same time. Gallus Vivius strained his mind so hard to understand the essence and impulses of insanity that he dragged his judgment off his seat and could never get it back again. He could boast of having become mad through wisdom. There are some who through fear anticipate the hand of the executioner, and one man who was being unbound to have his pardon read to him dropped stone dead on the scaffold, struck down by his mere imagination. We drip with sweat, we tremble, we turn pale and turn red at the blows of our imagination. Reclining to our feather beds, we feel our bodies agitated by their impact, sometimes to the point of expiring. And boiling youth, fast asleep, grows so hot in the harness that in dreams it satisfies its amorous desires. So that, as though it were an actual affair, they pour out mighty streams and stain the clothes they wear. And although it is nothing new to see horns grow overnight on someone who did not have them when he went to bed, nevertheless, what happened to Scipius, king of Italy, is memorable. Having been in the daytime a very excited spectator at a bullfight, and having all night in his dreams had horns on his head, he grew actual horns on his forehead by the power of his imagination. Passion gave the son of Croesus the voice that nature had refused him, and Antiochus took fever from the beauty of Strachonice, too vividly imprinted in his soul. Pliny says that he saw Lucius Causidius change from a woman into a man on his wedding day. Pontanus and others reported similar metamorphoses as having happened in Italy in these later ages, and through his and his mother's vehement desire, Iphis, the man, fulfilled vows made when he was a girl. Passing through Vitry-le-François, I might have seen a man whom the bishop of Soissons had named Germain at confirmation, but whom all the inhabitants of that place had seen and known as a girl named Marie until the age of 22. He was now heavily bearded and old, and not married. Straining himself in some way in jumping, he says, his masculine organs came forth. And among the girls there, a song is still current by which they warn each other not to take big strides for fear of becoming boys, like Marie Germain. It is not so great a marvel that this sort of accident is frequently met with. For if the imagination has power in such things, it is so continually and vigorously fixed on this subject, that in order not to have to relapse so often into the same thought and sharpness of desire, it is better off, if once and for all it incorporates this masculine member in girls. Some attribute to the power of imagination the scars of King Dagobert and of St. Francis. It is said that thereby bodies are sometimes removed from their places. And Celsus, tells of a priest who used to fly with his soul into such ecstasy that his body would remain a long time without breath and without sensation. St. Augustine names another who, whenever he heard lamentable and plaintive cries, would suddenly go into a trance and get so carried away that it was no use to shake him and shout at him, to pinch him and burn him until he had come to. Then he would say that he had heard voices, but as if coming from afar, and he would notice his burns and bruises, and that this was no feigned resistance to his senses, was shown by the fact that while in this state he had neither pulse nor breath. It is probable that the principal credit of miracles, visions, enchantments, and such extraordinary occurrences comes from the power of imagination, acting principally upon the minds of the common people, which are softer. Their belief has been so strongly seized that they think they see what they do not see. I am still of this opinion, that those comical inhibitions by which our society is so fettered that people talk of nothing else are for the most part the effects of apprehension and fear. For I know by experience that one man, whom I can answer for as for myself, on whom there could fall no suspicion whatever of impotence, and just as little of being enchanted, having heard a friend of his tell the story of an extraordinary impotence into which he had fallen, at the moment when he needed it least, and finding himself in a similar situation, was all at once so struck in his imagination by the horror of the story that he incurred the same fate, and from then on he was subject to relapse, for the ugly memory of his mishap checked him and tyrannized him. He found some remedy for this fancy by another fancy, which was that by admitting this weakness and speaking about it in advance, he relieved the tension of his soul, for when the trouble had been presented as one to be expected, his sense of responsibility diminished and weighed upon him less. When he had a chance of his own choosing, with his mind unembroiled and relaxed, and his body in good shape, to have his bodily powers first tested, then seized, and taken by surprise, with the other party's full knowledge of his problem, he was completely cured in this respect. A man is never, after incapable, unless from genuine impotence, with a woman with whom he has once been capable. This mishap is to be feared only in enterprises where our soul is immoderately tense with desire and respect, and especially if the opportunity is unexpected and pressing. There is no way of recovering from this trouble. I know one man who found it helpful to bring to it a body that had already begun to be sated elsewhere, so as to lull his frenzied ardor, and who with age finds himself less impotent through being less potent. And I know another who was helped when a friend assured him that he was supplied with a counter battery of enchantments that were certain to save him. I had better tell how this happened. A count, a member of a very distinguished family, with whom I was quite intimate, upon getting married to a beautiful lady who had been courted by a man who was present at the wedding feast, had his friends very worried, and especially an old lady, a relative of his, who was residing at the wedding and holding it at her house. She was fearful of these sorceries, and gave me to understand this. I asked her to rely on me. I had by chance in my coffers a certain little flat piece of gold, on which were engraved some celestial figures, to protect against sunstroke and take away a headache by placing it precisely on the suture of the skull. And to keep it there, it was sewed to a ribbon, intended to be tied under the chin. A kindred fancy to the one we were speaking of, Jacques Pelletier, had given me this singular present. I thought of making some use of it, and said to the Count that he might incur the same fate as others, there being men present who would like to bring this about, but that he should bodily go to bed, and I would do him a friendly turn, and would not, if he needed it, spare a miracle which was in my power, provided that he promised me, on his honor, to keep it most faithfully secret. He was only to make a given signal to me, when they came to bring him the midnight meal, if things had gone badly with him. He had had his soul and his ears so battered that he did find himself fettered by the trouble of his imagination, and gave me the signal. I told him then that he should get up, on the pretext of chasing us out, and playfully take the bathrobe that I had on, we were very close in height, and put it on him until he had carried out my prescription, which was this: when he had left, he should withdraw to pass water, say certain prayers 3 times, and go through certain motions. Each of these 3 times he should tie the ribbon I was putting in his hand around him, and very carefully lay the medal that was attached to it on his kidneys, with the figure in such and such a position. This done, having tied this ribbon firmly, so that it could neither come untied nor slip from its place, he should return to his business with complete assurance, and not forget to spread my robe over his bed, so that it should cover them both. These monkey tricks are the main part of the business. Our mind, unable to get free of the idea that such strange means must come from such abstruse science, their inanity gives them weight and reverence. All in all, it is certain that the characters on my medal prove themselves more venereal than solar, more useful for action than for prevention. It was a sudden and curious whim that led me to do such a thing, which was alien to my nature. I am an enemy of subtle and dissimulated acts, and hate trickery in myself, not only for sport, but also for someone's profit. If the action is not vicious, the road to it is. Amasis, king of Egypt, married Laodice, a very beautiful Greek girl, and he, who showed himself a gay companion everywhere else, fell short when it came to enjoying her, and threatened to kill her, thinking it was some sort of sorcery. As is usual in matters of fancy, she referred him to religion, and having made his vows and promises to Venus, he found himself divinely restored from the first night, after his oblations and sacrifices. Now women are wrong to greet us with those threatening, quarrelsome, and coy countenances, which put out our fires even as they light them. The daughter-in-law of Pythagoras used to say that the woman who goes to bed with a man should put off her modesty with her skirt, and put it on again with her petticoat. The soul of the assailant, when troubled with many various alarms, is easily discouraged, and when imagination has once made a man suffer this shame, and it does so only at the first encounters, inasmuch as these are more boiling and violent, and also because, in this first intimacy, a man is much more afraid of failing. Having begun badly, he gets from this accident a feverishness and vexation which lasts into subsequent occasions. Married people, whose time is all their own, should neither press their undertaking nor even attempt it if they are not ready. It is better to fail unbecomingly to Hansel the nuptial couch, which is full of agitation and feverishness, and wait for some other, more private and less tense opportunity, than to fall into perpetual misery for having been stunned and made desperate by a first refusal. Before taking possession, the patient should try himself out and offer himself lightly by sallies at different times, without priding himself and obstinately insisting on convincing himself definitely. Those who know that their members are naturally obedient, let them take care only to counteract the tricks of their fancies. People are right to notice the unruly liberty of this member, obtruding so importunately when we have no use for it, and failing so importunely when we have the most use for it, and struggling for mastery so imperiously with our will, refusing with so much pride and obstinacy our solicitations, both mental and manual. If, however, in the matter of his rebellion being blamed and used as proof to condemn him, he had paid me to plead his cause, I should perhaps place our other members, his fellows, under suspicion of having framed this trumped-up charge out of sheer envy of the importance and pleasure of the use of him, and of having armed everyone against him by a conspiracy, malignantly charging him alone with their common fault. For I ask you to think whether there is a single one of the parts of our body that does not often refuse its function to our will and exercise it against our will. They each have passions of their own, which rouse them and put them to sleep without our leave. How many times do the forced movements of our face bear witness to the thoughts that we are holding secret, and betray us to those present? The same cause that animates this member also animates, without our knowledge, the heart the lungs, and the pulse, the sight of a pleasing object spreading in us imperceptibly the flame of a feverish emotion? Are there only these muscles and these veins that stand up and lie down without the consent, not only of our will, but even of our thoughts? We do not command our hair to stand on end, or our skin to shiver with desire or fear. The hand often moves itself to where we do not send it. The tongue is paralyzed, and the voice congealed at their own time. Even when, having nothing to put into fry, we should like to forbid it, the appetite for eating and drinking does not fail to stir the parts that are subject to it, no more nor less than the other appetite, and it likewise abandons us importunely when it sees fit. The organs that serve to discharge the stomach have their own dilations and compressions, beyond and against our plans, just like those that are destined to discharge the kidneys. To vindicate the omnipotence of our will, St. Augustine alleges that he knew a man who commanded his behind to produce as many farts as he wanted, and his commentator, Vives, goes from one better with another example of his own time, of farts arranged to suit the tone of verses pronounced to their accompaniment. But all this does not really argue any pure obedience in this organ. For is there any that is ordinarily more indiscreet or tumultuous? Besides, I know one so turbulent and unruly that for 40 years it has kept its master farting with a constant and unremitting wind and compulsion, and is thus taking him to his death. But as for our will, on behalf of whose rights we set forth this complaint, how much more plausibly may we charge it with rebellion and sedition for its disorderliness and disobedience? Does it always will what we would will it to will? Doesn't it often will what we forbid it to will? And that to our evident disadvantage? Is it any more amenable than our other parts to the decisions of our reason? To conclude, I would say this in defense of the honorable member whom I represent. May it please the court to take into consideration that in this matter, although my client's case is inseparably and distinguishedly linked with that of an accessory, nevertheless he alone has been brought to trial, and that the arguments and charges against him are such as cannot, in view of the status of the parties, be in any manner pertinent or relevant to the aforesaid accessory, whereby is revealed his accuser's manifest animosity and disrespect for law. However that may be, nature will meanwhile go her way, protesting that the lawyers and judges quarrel and pass sentence in vain. Indeed, she would have done no more than is right if she had endowed with some particular privilege this member, author of the sole immortal work of mortals. Wherefore to Socrates generation is a divine act, and love a desire for immortality, and itself an immortal demon. Perhaps it is by this effect of the imagination that one man here gets rid of the scrofula, which his companion carries back to Spain. This effect is the reason why, in such matters, it is customary to demand that the mind be prepared. Why do the doctors work on the credulity of their patient beforehand with so many false promises of a cure, if not so that the effect of the imagination may make up for the imposture of their decoction? They know that one of the masters of the trade left them this in writing, that there have been men for whom the mere sight of medicine did the job. And this whole caprice has just come to hand, apropos of the story that an apothecary, a servant of my late father, used to tell me, a simple man and Swiss, of a nation little addicted to vanity and lying. He had long known a merchant at Toulouse, sickly and subject to the stone, who often needed enemas, and ordered various kinds from his doctors, according to the circumstances of his illness. Once they were brought to him, nothing was omitted of the accustomed formalities. Often he tested them by hand to make sure they were not too hot. There he was, lying on his stomach, and all the motions were gone through, except that no injection was made. After this ceremony, the apothecary having retired, and the patient being accommodated as if he had really taken the enema, he felt the same effect from it as those who do take them. And if the doctor did not find his operation sufficient, he would give him 2 or 3 more of the same sort. My witness swears that when, to save the expense, for he paid them as if he had taken them, this sick man's wife sometimes tried to have just warm water used, the effect revealed the fraud, and having found that kind useless, they were obliged to return to the first method. A woman, thinking she had swallowed a pin in her bread, was screaming in agony as though she had unbearable pain in her throat, where she thought she felt the stuck. But because, externally, there was neither swelling nor alteration, a smart man, judging that it was only a fancy and notion derived from some bit of bread that had scratched her as it went down, made her vomit, and, on the sly, tossed a crooked pen into what she threw up. The woman, thinking she had thrown it up, felt herself suddenly relieved of her pain. I know that one gentleman, having entertained a goodly company at his house, 3 or 4 days later boasted, as a sort of joke, for there was nothing in it, that he had made them eat cat in a pie, at which one lady in the party was so horrified that she fell into a violent stomach disorder and fever, and it was impossible to save her. Even animals are subject, like ourselves, to the power of their imagination. Witness dogs who let themselves die out of grief for the loss of their masters. We also see them yap and twitch in their dreams, and horses whining and writhe. But all this may be attributed to the narrow seam between the soul and body, through which the experience of the one is communicated to the other. Sometimes, however, one's imagination acts not only against one's own body, but against someone else's. And just as a body passes on its sicknesses to its neighbor, as is seen in the plague, the pox, the soreness of the eyes, which are transmitted from one body to the other. By looking at sore eyes become sore. From body into body, ills pass over. Likewise, the imagination, when vehemently stirred, launches darts that can injure an external object. The ancients maintained that certain women of Scythia, when animated and enraged against anyone, would kill them with their mere glance. Tortoises and ostriches hatch their eggs just by looking at them, a sign that their sight has some ejaculative virtue. And as for sorcerers, they are said to have baleful and harmful eyes. Some evil eye bewitched my tender lambs. To me, magicians are poor authorities. Nevertheless, we know by experience that women transmit marks of their fancies to the bodies of their children they carry in their womb. Witness the one who gave birth to the Moor. And there was presented to Charles, King of Bohemia, an emperor, a girl from near Pisa, all hairy and bristly, who her mother said had been thus conceived because of a picture of St. John the Baptist hanging by her bed. With animals, it is the same. Witness Jacob's sheep, and the partridges and hares that snow turns white in the mountains. Recently at my house, a cat was seen watching a bird on a treetop, and, after they had locked gazes for some time, the bird let itself fall, as if dead, between the cat's paws, either intoxicated by its own imagination, or drawn by some attracting power of the cat. Those who like falconry have heard the story of the falconer who, setting his gaze obstinately upon a kite in the air, wagered that by the sole power of his gaze he would bring it down, and did. At least, so they say, for I refer the stories that I borrow to the conscience of those from whom I take them. The reflections are my own, and depend on the proofs of reason, not of experience. Everyone can add his own examples to them, and he who has none, let him not fail to believe that there are plenty, in view of the number and variety of occurrences. If I do not apply them well, let another apply them for me. So in the study that I am making of our behavior and motives, fabulous testimonies, provided they are possible, serve like true ones, whether they have happened or no, in Paris or Rome, to John or Peter. They exemplify, at all events, some human potentiality, and thus their telling imparts useful information to me. I see it and profit from it, just as well in shadow as in substance. And of the different readings that histories often give, I take for my use the one that is most rare and memorable. There are authors whose end is to tell what has happened. Mine, if you could attain it, will be to talk about what can happen. The schools are justly permitted to suppose similitudes when they have none at hand. I do not do so, however. In that respect I surpass all historical fidelity, being scrupulous to the point of superstition. In the examples that I bring in here, and of what I have heard, done, or said, I have forbidden myself to dare to alter even the slightest and most inconsequential circumstances. My conscience does not falsify one iota. My knowledge, I don't know. In this connection, I sometimes fall to thinking whether it benefits a theologian, a philosopher, and such people of exquisite and exact conscience and prudence to write history. How can they stake their fidelity on the fidelity of an ordinary person? How be responsible for the thoughts of persons unknown, and give their conjectures as coin of the realm? Of complicated actions that happen in their presence, they would refuse to give testimony if placed under oath by a judge, and they know no man so intimately that they would undertake to answer fully for his intentions. I consider it less hazardous to write of things past than present, inasmuch as the writer has only to give an account of a borrowed truth. Some urge me to write the events of my time, believing that I see them with a view less distorted by passion than another man's, and from closer, because of the access that fortune has given me to the heads of different parties. What they forget is that even for all the glory of Sallust, I would not take the trouble, being a sworn enemy of obligation, assiduity, perseverance, and that there is nothing so contrary to my style as an extended narration. I cut myself off so often for lack of breath. I have neither composition nor development that is worth anything. I am more ignorant than a child of the phrases and terms that serve for the commonest things, and so I have chosen to say what I know how to say, accommodating the matter to my power. If I took a subject that would lead me along, I might not be able to measure up to it, and with my freedom being so very free, I might publish judgments which, even according to my own opinion and to reason, would be illegitimate and punishable. Plutarch might well say to us, concerning his accomplishments in this line, that the credit belongs to others if his examples are wholly and everywhere true, but that their being useful to posterity and presented with the luster which lights our way to virtue, that is his work. There is no danger, as there is in a medicinal drug, in an old story being this way or that.